Bismillah, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen, nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een, amma ba'd. We continue with the book Kitab Ut-Tawheed by Shaykhana al-A'lama al-Mujaddid Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala. Before we finished, just a few questions. One is the difference between ash-shafa'ah wal istighatha. Just to understand before we continue, what is the difference between these? How can we put these into practice? How can we understand them? So what is istighatha? What do you think it is that? I know you haven't been here, but so okay, let's begin with isti'adha. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. We say that every single day in our salah. What we're saying, I seek protection. I seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from shaitan. So you're seeking protection. So isti'adha is a form of protection, right? It's a form of protection. So the question here is, can I seek protection from anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's the question. So shafa'ah, for example, is you using a middle person to get to the next person. So I am using you, Zed, to get to Sa'd, because I can't reach Sa'd directly, so I'm going to use you as the middle person. That is shafa'ah. So the question is, can I use somebody other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Question you ask yourself. These topics, everything we're doing is, can I do this for someone else other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What level can I go to until it becomes a matter of shirk? Like, these are the type of questions. So when we say isti'adha, istighatha, we are talking about protection. To what extent can I seek protection and help from others than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And isti'adha was before the affliction happens, before magic, before black magic, before evil eye, before. So you're saying, oh Allah, protect me from a situation. Oh Allah, I'm going on a journey. Oh Allah, protect me on this journey. This is isti'adha. You're seeking protection before anything even happens. And then you have istighatha, which is after the affliction. So now you have been afflicted with evil eye, you have been afflicted with black magic, etc. So now you're saying, oh Allah, protect me. Oh Allah, save me. Oh Allah, take me out from this evil eye, from this black magic. So you're only turning to Allah because He is the only Savior, the one to protect, to want to take away all of these harms. And shafa'ah is using what we know in, what terminology you may have heard is wasila. Like a wasila is using a middle person to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So saying, for example, O Prophet of Allah, I am asking you to go to Allah and ask Allah that He forgives me of my sins. So using the Prophet ﷺ to get to Allah, because you were saying, I am sinful, I am not a good person, I cannot go directly, I must use the means to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So that is ash-shafa'ah, which is wasila, which is what the Prophet ﷺ is going to do on the Day of Judgment when he will go into sajda. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, raise your head. And we know you need two conditions. What are the two conditions for shafa'ah? Saad, you were here, what are they? For intercession, what are the two conditions? One is in Ayatul Kursi, and the other one is about the person. In Ayatul Kursi, where does it come? Yashfa'u. Man dhal ladhi yashfa'u indahu illa bi'idhnih. So whoever wants to do shafa'ah needs to be by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So shafa'ah can only be done by the permission, with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then they have to both be upon Tawheed, have to both be righteous, have to both be practicing, the one you are asking and the one who is asking. So the one who is asking for you and the one who is asking. But this is in general terminology. If I, for example, come to you and say, make dua for me, I'm going through a difficult situation. Zed, make dua for me, make dua for me. That is the shafa'a we're talking about, that is allowed. Make dua for me. But going to somebody and saying, oh Prophet of Allah, oh Shaykh, oh this, ask Allah to forgive me. Go to Allah and ask Allah to forgive me, like using that person as the middle person, that is the one that is not allowed. Because that is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah, now we are going to go into chapter 19, which is regarding ghulu. Ghulu is, we mentioned it before, it is over exaggerating in a love for somebody. We love a person, but we over exaggerate and increase them from the status that they have, and we elevate it to a higher rank than what it deserves, and then we start to give them godly figures, godly attributes. And the easiest way to explain before we begin this chapter is, if we look at what the Shias do with Hassan radiallahu anh and Hussein radiallahu anh. They say that they know the past, they know the present, they know the future, meaning they knew what happened in the past, they knew what is going to happen in the future, they knew everything that is occurring before it's occurred. So they're giving them these godly-like attributes. So this is what? Over-exaggerating in their love for that person. So now, this is excessive love in the righteous, or excessive dogma in the righteous persons, is the root cause of infidelity, of kufr, of mankind, and its deviation from true religion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ahlul kitabi, لا تغلوا في دينكم ولا تقولوا على الله إلا الحق. O people of the scriptures, the Jews and the Christians, do not exceed the limits in your religion, nor say of Allah anything but the truth. And when we talk about this exceeding the limits, there's a famous hadith which we have heard many times of Anas radiallahu anh, where he says that 3 men came to the wives of the Prophet ﷺ asking about how the Prophet ﷺ worshipped. And they told the men that the Prophet ﷺ would do this and this and this. So they thought, okay, the Prophet ﷺ did that, we must do more. So one says, I will fast all throughout the year and I will not take a single day off. The second says, I will not sleep at night and I will spend the night in da'wah. The third says, I will not marry and I will spend my time just giving da'wah. I will not marry. So the Prophet ﷺ heard this, he called these people and he said, are you the ones who said such and such? They say yes, thinking that they're going to get a tap on the back. But the Prophet ﷺ says, I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than you, and I fear Him more than you. Yet I sleep at night and I get up and I pray. Yet I fast some days and I take some days off. Yes, I marry, I do what is needed. And then he says them famous lines which you all heard, especially when it comes to the khutbatul nikah. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَعْمَلْ بِسُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي, or فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. That the one who exceeds my sunnah, or the one who does not act according to my sunnah, then he is not from me. So this is that point which is, do not exceed the limits in your religion. In that ayah, do not exceed the limits in your religion. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us boundaries, has given us what to do in our lives, how we should behave, what we should do, and the Prophet ﷺ has given us those guidelines. And we should not exceed those boundaries thinking, I will do more. These people were still doing good things. They were fasting. They were giving da'wah. They were praying all throughout the night. But this is not something that the Prophet ﷺ has taught us. So we do only which the Prophet ﷺ has taught us, and we stay within those boundaries. And then all these actions that these people were doing, those 3, were exaggerated, were overburdening, were extra. And that is what this ghulu part is. In Hajj, when we stone, for example, in Hajj, we are told that we use a small stone. You know when you go to the Jamarat and you stone what they say, the shaitan? It's like these big rocks and you throw stones at them. The hadith says, get little small stones. But what happens when people exaggerate? They will take rocks. They will use slippers. They will throw whatever they can. And this is what? Over-exaggeration. This is that excessiveness. This is going beyond what the Prophet ﷺ has taught. And the Prophet ﷺ has warned against exaggeration because that is what destroyed the people of the past. The Jews and the Christians would over-exaggerate because they will say Jesus is the Son of God. Jews will say Uzair is the Son of God. And the monks, what would they do? They will seclude themselves. They will put themselves, and nowadays we get our Sufi brothers who dig graves and they seclude themselves in those graves for a number of days. For a number of days they will seclude themselves in there. They will come out and all of a sudden there will be an over exaggeration of their love for these people. And look, how did they manage to do that? For a month, for example, they have stayed underground with only a little food and a little water, and they've survived. So there must be something such high level to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they were allowed to do this. This is what all over exaggeration. So what lessons do we take? The prohibition of being excessive in revering persons or in offering good deeds. So we don't over exaggerate in our love for a person, or we don't over exaggerate in our deeds that we do. We do it according to the Quran and the Sunnah. Whatever is legislated, we stick to it. We stick to it. The Quranic verse condemns the practices of the Jews and the Christians who exceedingly praise righteous persons and practice their religion excessively. Muslims are urged to take the moderate path in actions upon the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They should not be excessive or inadequate in fulfilling their obligations. Muslims are warned against shirk and all avenues leading to it. And this is why we have a saying known as Saddu Zara'i, which is cutting off a path before it can lead to something major. Like the path that you are cutting off may not be sinful. May not be sinful. For example, if you say putting women in public places, certain public places, it may be better to stop it before it gets worse, where the woman is then interacting and being amongst men, or places of shirk taking place, for example. You're cutting it off before it can reach that level. For example, when we have pictures and all this stuff around, the reason why they say cut it off, because those pictures could then lead to idols, which could then lead to something being worshipped. So anything which could lead to that extent, it should be cut off before it can go there. And this is known as Saddu Zara'i. Ibn Abbas, he commented on the verse where he says, وَقَالُوا لَا تَذَرُنَّ آلِيَتُكُمْ وَلَا تَذَرُنَّ وَدًّا وَلَا سُوَاعًا وَلَا يَغُوثَ وَيَعُوقَ وَنَسْرًا. And they have said, you shall not leave your gods, nor shall you leave Wad, nor Suwa, nor Yaghuth, nor Ya'uq, nor Nasr. And these are names of idols. And these people lived just before Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. And when they died, this is when shirk began. And we mentioned this story many times of how shirk began, so I'm not going to go into that again. And then what happened is, they over-exaggerated, they made pictures, they made statues, then they started to worship these people. هذه أسماء رجال صالحين من قوم نوح فلما حلقوا أوحى الشيطان إلى قومهم أن أنصبوا إلى مجالسهم التي كانوا يجلسون فيها أنصابا وسموها بأسمائهم ففعلوا ولم تعبد. That these are the names of some righteous persons from Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam's people. When they passed away, Shaitan inspired their people to set up statues in their honor and set them in their gathering places and to give them statuses, the names of those departed. They did this but did not worship them until these people passed away and knowledge of their origins were forgotten. Then they were worshipped. When people forgot about them. This is why I always say to people, you know, when people always say, what is wrong with what I am doing? What is wrong with what I am doing? We can start something brand new today. There can just be us sat here and we can start something brand new. It could be a new form of zikr, for example, or a new form of salah, or praying 10 rak'ahs in one go, in a jama'ah. Today, to the outside, they will look, what are they doing? This is ajib, this is something stupid, this is something new, what is this? 1 year later, when small group becomes double, triple, half the masjid is full. 10 years later, 20 years later, when people even forgot how did it even began, that we just sat here and thought, let's just start something for the sake of starting something. No hadith, no Quran ayah. 20 years later, what happens? What is wrong with what I am doing? Prove to me I can't do what I am doing. Look at the masjid is full. Everyone is sat in the masjid. Everyone is worshipping Allah. And who are you to come and stop this? And this is what we find in all of this. For example, the milad, the beating that they do when it comes to the 10 of Ashura. All these new activities, Thursday dhikr nights, all these new activities had to have an origin. And that origin is some people got together and started it. With no base, with no understanding, with no going back to the actual Quran and the Sunnah. And then so many years later like this, when people even forgot what is the origins, who were these people, who were those people that even started it, who were the people that are even worshipping, it becomes normality and it becomes part of the religion. And they feel if we do not do it, then our religion or that practice which we are doing, we have missed something, or we are sinful. And this is that issue that we have. قال غير واحد من سلف لما ماتوا أقفوا على قبورهم ثم صوروا تماثيلهم ثم طال عليهم الأمد. That most of our predecessors have stated, after the death of the righteous person, they confined at their graves and made statues, and after much time passed, they started worshipping them. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, and that's the statement of Ibn al-Qayyim. So the lessons we take from this point is, excessive glorification of righteous people is preliminary a step to worshipping them, and thus which is something that we should stop in Islam. And we find this, that many people have pictures. It could be of their own grandfathers, fathers who may have passed away, in their homes, and they put it on in their homes, or they have it in their wallets. These are things that we need to stop doing. Why? Because eventually it may be that not you're not your kids, not your kids' kids, but their kids may see this and think these were righteous people, and may begin in that process of leading towards shirk. And we know that pictures within the house, angels do not come there. Barakah is taken from those homes. And this is what, when the barakah is gone, this is what leads to many issues within households. These small things. So these are things that we have to try and stay away from. And also Muslims are warned against any type of innovation, even though the intention behind offering them may be something which seems good. Because when somebody wants to do an innovation, a bid'ah, it's not like they have this thing that, oh, I'm going to start something new and take the people of towards from Allah to a different path. No, everyone has a good intention. Everyone thinks, how can we get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What can we do to get ourselves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Everyone has a good intention. But the action is wrong. The action is not in line with what we are taught in the Quran and the Sunnah. And this is the biggest issue. And this is due to lack of religious knowledge, which results mainly from what we say is mainly because of the lack of scholars that we have around us. Because the lack of the scholars that we have around us, meaning the knowledge around us has dried up. And with this and that lack of knowledge that we have within us, we will fall into many traps. Because we feel this must be the religion. Because the one who is doing it has a big beard, is wearing a thobe, is wearing a turban, has a tasbih in his hand, he must be somebody religious, he can't be away from the deen. So why not follow him? He must be close to Allah, he has a mark on his head. And we can't work out what is right and what is wrong. And because of this lack of knowledge, we find that we fall into many avenues of falling into innovations, of falling into traps of where we are going over excessiveness in our religion. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu an is reported to have said that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Do not exaggerate in praise of me, just as the Christians exaggerated in the praise of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, the son of Mary. I am but a slave, so call me Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala slave and his messenger." And this is in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih al-Muslim. And this is that evidence that when we go into the next chapter, that do not over exaggerate in your praise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because Isa alayhi salam, they said what? He is the son of God. So before we go into that, who are the 5 major prophets, messengers? Ulu al-Azm. Name me just from top of your head. Who do you think are the 5 major prophets and messengers? Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. No. Nuh alayhi salam, Musa, Isa, and then Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are known as the Ulu al-Azm, the 5 major prophets and messengers. And those people, what? The people of the book, the Jews and the Christians. So whenever you hear Ahlul Kitab, these are the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not believing in the Trinity, etc. They used to stay away from pork. They used to have the guidelines in the Torah, etc. So they were those who lived according to the rules. These are Ahlul Kitab, and this is why we have that rule that we can eat the meat of the Ahlul Kitab. You can also marry the people of Ahlul Kitab. The men can, but the women can't. These are just rules. So when we hear those words, Ahlul Kitab, these are the Jews and the Christians. And then when we hear Bani Israel, the sons of Israel, these are those 12 sons of Ya'qub alayhi salatu wasalam. And like today, for example, what do we see? Whatever the Imam says, whatever the Peer says, it has to be right. And we blind follow. Because there is an over-exaggeration of love. It's like, for example, if I'm telling you something today, it is your duty to say, prove it. What is the hadith? What is the ayah? Where did you get that statement from? What do you mean this? You should never ever listen to a statement and think, oh, because he is an imam or he is a sheikh or he is a teacher, it's enough. Hands up, I'm going to accept it, I'm going to blind follow. No. It is your duty to question, ask, prove it to me. Because if I give you a statement and say, if you were to jump off a 10 feet floor, saying Subhanallah 10 times, and you land on the floor, your reward will increase by 10%. You shouldn't say, MashaAllah, I'm going to go try that at home today. your question should be, prove it to me. What hadith or what Quran ayah did you get that from? This is that today might sound funny, but these are the things that take place. Like for example, I went to a masjid, it was in the first rak'ah, you read Surah Ikhlas 1,000 times. In my head I was thinking, by the time I get to the 100th, I'll be tired. I want to go sleep. 1,000 times, if you want to get a reward of Jannah, 1,000 times you have to read it. And it has to be in the dark. And you have to be in a certain corner in your room, secluded. Like when you hear these things, you should be questioning. But the thing is, that masjid was packed with probably 500 to 1,000 people just packing out the masjid. And all of them were involved in that prayer. And when you see this and you think to yourself, why? Because they are just blind following what is being told to them, what is being fed to them, and no one is questioning. And this is when major issues happen. So according to the hadith, it is prohibited to exceed the proper bounds in praising the Prophet ﷺ by not regarding him a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Doing that is an act of shirk and is thus prohibited. The Prophet ﷺ was keen to warn his nation against all avenues leading towards shirk. Excessive praise of the righteous results in something which could lead towards shirk. Muslims are warned not to follow the footsteps of the unbelievers. See, whilst we're just on this point, you see, many of us will speak to colleagues at work who are non-Muslims. There'll be acquaintances. So it's like, what extent can we be friends with them? What extent can, meaning outside of work, what can we do with them? If you were to constantly go on dinner with them, personalize your friendship with them, become very close to them, this is when you may fall into that ayah, which is, if you have love for the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, then you become one of them. You become one of them. Having that friendship which exceeds the boundaries of acquaintances at work, hello, hi, how are you? Work relationship, exceeding that to a personal level, a friendship level, a going to one house level, a going out on a regular basis level, a conversing about life and a conversing about your religions, etc. This is something which you may fall into that ayah, and you should check your friendship, your level with them. Because you should surround yourself with people who are Muslims firstly, and then you shorten that with people who will remind you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because your friends are going to shape you. We've heard the hadith, Al-Marru ala dini khalili, a person is on the religion of his friends. Whatever your friends around you are doing, eventually it's going to rub off on you. Eventually, if they swear a lot, if they smoke, if they're into drugs, if they don't go to the masjid, but you're somebody who is practicing, eventually over time what will happen? That salah you are praying in the masjid, you may miss it here and there because you want to go out with your friends. Then you might say to your friend, oh, that cigarette, let me have a try of it. They are swearing all the time just to get involved in their jokes. You might also swear here and there. That the effect, it starts to rub off on you. And when it rubs off onto you, that is that hadith which is, you are upon the religion of your friends. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْغُلُوء فَإِنَّمَا أَحْلَكَ مِنْ كَانَ قَبْلِكُمْ الْغُلُوء. Beware of exaggeration. Your predecessors, those that came before you, perished on account of their exaggeration. And this is a believer, he should be adl, he should be just, be balanced upon the Quran and the Sunnah, and not over-exaggerate. And when we say adl, we say doing that which is in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah, and doing justice to it, doing it to the T. Why? Because if the Prophet ﷺ didn't overdo it, or didn't give us a rukhsah to say, you can exceed, you can do more, then we should stop, because he was the best. He was the best person to follow. He was the one who set the guidelines for us. He was the one who set the footprint for us. So by us saying, no, we should exceed a little bit here, we should do a little bit more here, we should increase this, we are either saying the Prophet ﷺ did less, or he didn't do enough. It's one or the other. Either he didn't do enough, he stopped and he couldn't do more, he didn't want to do more, or he just gave us enough, a less amount, and we're given the opportunity now to increase in this. And this is something which we can say is a stain on the Prophet ﷺ, that we are saying that he did not give us enough, that we have to do more. Yes, we don't over-exaggerate in the Prophet ﷺ. He is the best. He is the one who came upon this earth as the best of creation. He is the best of human beings. But we do not over-exaggerate in our praise for him and raise him to the ranks of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do not do that ghulu. We do not over-exaggerate. And this is something we should always do. Think about those before us. Think about the Jews and the Christians of the past. Read about history. Read about the times of Jahiliyyah, how they were destroyed. What was the reason they were destroyed? People of Quraysh. What did they do? How did they live their life? What was it that made them go from people who were so stern and harsh? And they also worshipped Allah. They also did tawaf around the Kaaba. They also did all of that stuff. But that worshipping of the idols with their destruction, understanding all of that, understanding how the Prophet ﷺ came, destroyed all of that. History, how they got destroyed and what destroyed them, it only will make us stronger in our own religion when we read about the people of the past. This is why what happens is, you may get taught something without knowing a different side, without knowing what happened in the past, or where this even began from. Like for example, someone says shirk. Shirk is a major sin. It's something which is going to lead you towards Jahannam. If you do major shirk, you are in Jahannam and you will not be able to come out until you make dua before you pass away, tawbah before you pass away. And you leave it as that and you walk away. What happens? Everywhere you walk, shirk, shirk, shirk. You're off the religion, you're off the religion, you're going Jahannam, you're going Jahannam. It's about understanding what even is shirk. Where did it begin from? Time of Nuh alayhi salam. Who fell into it? Big people fell into shirk. They fell into shirk in the recent past. How did they fall into it? Not knowing, understanding the differences. What type of shirks are they? These are all you learn from mistakes that took place in the past. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, he says, halaka al-matata'una qalaha thalatha. Destroyed are those who are extreme in religion. And he said this 3 times. And this is, for example, we see the Prophet, we see the people prostrating to these individuals. Could be any individual. For example, you have Sheikh Nazim. We mentioned this 2 weeks ago. Sheikh Nazim, who died. And this was a Sufi Pir guy who they elevated such ranks and said he could do many different things. Travel the world at night and etc. He says he would fly out of space. He mentions about someone else that he physically meets the Prophet ﷺ. The one thing is meeting in a dream, another thing is meeting physically. That a person meets the Prophet ﷺ physically and learns from him now. Not in the past, now. And we have people that say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to their dreams and teaches them in their dreams. We have people that say they have wudu they haven't broke their wudu for so many months and years and etc. Like there's so many over exaggerated points out there that if you think about it and think, if our Prophet could not do none of this, then who are these people that are mere humans that do not know if they're going to Jannah, Jahannam, and our Prophet was guaranteed Jannah, could not do none of these, but you who just come about recently are claiming to do all these superstitious things. All extreme views in the religion, we must be balanced, not take any, how would you say it, anything unless there is a nas in the religion, meaning the Quran, the Sunnah. We should not take, this is what I was mentioning before, we should not take anything from anyone, even me, unless there is a Quran and a Sunnah to back that point up. And this was the topic of ghulu, over-exaggeration and extremism in the religion, whether it comes to the people or whether it comes to certain deeds, certain actions. And now the next chapter, which is the condemnation of the one who worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the grave of a righteous man, and how then does this amount to worship of the man. And this is what? Worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but at the grave of a righteous man. So, for example, you have shrines. We've heard of shrines, darbars, etc. It's not going there and saying to the person in the grave, give me this, but it is going there and by that person's grave you are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning you're still raising your hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salama mentions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger that in Abyssinia she saw a church full of pictures and statues. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when a righteous man or pious worshipper amongst them dies, they build a place of worship over his grave and set up all kinds of pictures and statues. They are the worst of all creatures before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So firstly, who was Salama? Just a understanding, because she was a mother of the believer. But she wasn't always the mother of the believer. She was Hind bint Abu Umayyah al-Makhzumiyya al-Qurayshi. She was one of the wives of Prophet ﷺ, but before that she was the wife of Abu Salama. And after Abu Salama passed away is when she married the Prophet ﷺ, after they came to Medina, after Hijrah. So she witnessed two Hijrahs. One was to Abyssinia and then Medina. So now here she's talking about her time when she went to Abyssinia with her first husband, Abu Salama. And she says that I saw these people building places upon the graves. And the Prophet ﷺ said what? They would put pictures of their righteous people, etc., in churches and graves. And they will build upon them, upon these graves. And the reason this is not allowed, for example, building a masjid upon a grave, is because it's something that leads to shirk. There is the Tablighi Jamaat, the Tablighi Jamaat. In India, they have one of their shuyukh, one of their maulana, buried within their masjid. Buried within the masjid. And this is something which is not allowed, which we're going to go through the ahadiths showing that you are not allowed to build a masjid or a place of worship on top of a grave, or put a grave within the masjid. But then we're going to go to the question of what about the grave of the Prophet ﷺ? So inshallah we'll go into that later on. And this shows us the impermissibility of putting pictures of righteous people in a masjid and also building upon graves. And Shias, they do this a lot. Shias in their masajid, they put pictures of their Ayatollah Khomeini and all these kind of people. They put their pictures up on the walls of their righteous people. And it's evil because it leads to extremism. and excessiveness of worshipping these people, and deviation occurs because of these issues. Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala says the first to build mosque on graves were the Shias, and then the Sufis copied. So what about, as I mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ masjid? One thing we must understand, when the Prophet ﷺ had his masjid, Masjid Nabwi, the house of Aisha was next to the masjid. So when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he was buried in the house of Aisha. Because we know, for example, the Shaheed and the Prophets, they are buried where they pass away. Wherever they pass away upon the earth, they are buried there. That's why we see the Shuhada of Badr, the Shuhada of Uhud, they are buried in the same place where they pass away. It's not take them to a different land or where they came from, where they were born, etc. No, they were buried in the same place. So they were connected. So first they extended the masjid backwards. But then later on they needed to extend. The one who was in charge at the time, he was told, do not extend it to the Prophet ﷺ's grave, to the house of Aisha. Leave that. But they had to extend, so they extended and connected it to the house of Aisha. So now when you look, it looks like it is connected in all one masjid, like it's within the masjid. But what they have done is put a barrier around that you cannot pray directly towards the grave. There's a barrier that goes around that basically misses the graves. So when you miss, this is what they're trying to say, is missing the grave of the Prophet, and they put a barrier that is not actually part of the masjid. And in the time of bin Abdul Aziz, he actually was thinking about demolishing it and differentiating the house of Aisha to the masjid. But because this was going to cause so much fitna, he went against it. So if something is going to cause a lot of fitna and uproar, then there's certain things you have a rukhsa, you allow to not do or stay away.
Let's say if it's like a normal person's like graves, would they be allowed to like go on top of it or something like that, like demolish the grave and like make a mosque on top of that? Like if it was just like a normal person.
What do you mean demolish? We're not talking about demolishing a grave. For example, if this is the masjid, and this is the house, right? Because they are connected, it's this part here that needs a differentiation to separate. So it'll be breaking off this part. You're not going to break the house and take the Prophet's grave out and move it. You can't do that. You have to break part of the masjid to differentiate the two things. So that was going to cause the fitna. But for example, in different masajids, the qabr is not upon the side. It will be in the forefront of the masjid. For example, this is a room. This is top floor, bottom floor. It'll be there at the front. So people will be praying here, the grave will be there. Or it'll be in a special room in there. That people, once they pray, they will go in there, do their ziyarah, go home. That is a part of the masjid. That's within the masjid. It was built within the masjid. Or the masjid was built around that grave specifically. They're two different things. And the hadith of Aisha radiyallahu anha, where she says, لما نزل برسول صلى الله عليه وسلم طفق يطرى خميسة له على وجهه فإذا أغتم بها كشفها. When the death of the Prophet ﷺ approached Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger, he began to draw a piece of cloth, the bed sheet over his face, sometimes covering and sometimes removing because of distress. He ﷺ said in this state, لعنة الله على اليهود والنصارى اتخذوا قبور أنبيائهم المساجد. That la'nat upon the Yahud and the Nasara. That Allah's curse be upon the Jews and the Christians for taking the graves of their prophets as places of worship. Thus he ﷺ warned the people about their actions. Had there not been any fear of making the Prophet's grave a place of worship, he his Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's grave would have been as open as the graves of the companions, meaning in the public eye everywhere where people could go and worship. But the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, do not make my grave a place of worship. But what do we find? We find people going every single day for Umrah and Hajj and doing what? Turning towards the Prophet ﷺ's grave and saying, "Oh Prophet of Allah, give me this. Oh Prophet of Allah, forgive me. Oh Prophet of Allah, I need this. Oh Prophet of Allah." He is saying, do not go to my grave and make it a place of worship. But we have made it a place of worship. We are told in a hadith that there are 3 places that we should rush to visit, meaning ziyarah, and the Prophet's grave is one of them. We go there for ziyarah, we go there to give salam, and that is all we should be doing. You want to sit outside the grave, no problem, but do not make dua there, do not do ibadah there, do not do worship there. This is not what the Prophet ﷺ's grave is for, and this is what he is telling us not to do. So, and this is also a thing that the Prophet ﷺ has told us. When we have our graves, there should just be a handspan high. The tombstone should be a handspan. Why? We shouldn't over-exaggerate it and making big graves and then decorating those graves and putting flowers around the graves and having tombstones that say, to my beloved this and my beloved that. This is not a grave that the Prophet ﷺ has taught us about. Why? Because what happens is when we start doing these things, people then eventually start sitting at these graves and start worshipping at these graves and start reading extra Quran at these graves, and some will start doing nafil at these graves, etc. And this is what then, this leads to that thing of what the Prophet ﷺ is saying, stay away from. And those people, what did they do? They committed 2 great evils. One was masjid on graves, and the second was pictures of these righteous people across the place of the masjids. And this is what is the basis of shirk. Inshallah, we'll take one more hadith, inshallah, and we'll stop there, which is Jundub bin Abdullah radiyallahu anhu. He says, I heard the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam say only 5 days before his death, I am free and clear towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of having any of you as my friend, as my Khalil. Verily, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken me as his friend, just as he had taken Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. If I would have taken anyone from my ummah as a Khalil, I would have taken Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anh as a Khalil. So this point here, I would have taken Abu Bakr as-Siddiq as a Khalil. This is an evidence you can use against the Shias when it comes to Abu Bakr should not be the Khalifa. But the Prophet ﷺ, I would have taken Abu Bakr as a Khalil, is showing that Abu Bakr had a really high status in the eyes of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is showing another thing, which is saying that he is my right hand man. He is the one who supports me. He is the one who is behind me. And if anything was to occur, he is the one that will take the reins. Those who preceded before you used to make their prophet's grave into places of worship. Beware, do not take any graves as places of worship. I forbid you to do so. So now it's like these are those people who go to graves, slaughter, make dua, pray at graves. This is all impermissible and haram. Or they build masjids upon the graves. All this is haram and not allowed. Going to graves, slaughtering at graves, making dua at graves, any type of worship cannot be done at a grave, except for you going and making dua for the person and remembering your own death is going to come to you. These are the 2 reasons why we go to graves. Making dua for the person that's in the grave, and remembering about death that is going to come to you one day, and you are also going to be in this grave. And just a general meaning that is written: immediately before his death, the Prophet ﷺ informed his nation about his status in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He ﷺ asserted that he reached the highest degree of love and intimacy, and so did Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, since the heart of the Prophet ﷺ was filled upon with affection and glorification for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala due to his awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's grandeur and status. He ﷺ dropped the possibility of taking an intimate other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Moreover, the Prophet ﷺ said that if he had taken a friend, a close friend, it would have been Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Such a superstition indicated that the virtue of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq has served as a prophetic directive to appointing Abu Bakr as-Siddiq in the position of the Prophet's Khalifa. Then the Prophet ﷺ forbade following the footsteps of the Yahud and the Nasara, who excessively revered the graves of their prophets to the extent that they devoted acts of worship to such graves and consequently fell into shirk because of it. And this shows that the knowing the virtues of the two intimate servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ and Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, that they were the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were Khalilullah, and they were somebody who were very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah we will leave it there. We'll just take the statement of Ibn Taymiyyah before we finish. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, immediately before his death, the Prophet ﷺ forbade Muslims to take graves as place of worship and cursed those who committed this grave sin. Similarly, performing prayer at the graves takes the same ruling even if no mosque is built, and this is the meaning of Aisha radhiyallahu anha's statement, which provides, but it was feared that it may be taken as a place of worship, for the companions were never to build a mosque at the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. Meaning, if it was to be taken as a place of worship, the companions would have built a place of worship around or for the Prophet ﷺ. But because they had not done this, they understood that you cannot use graves as places of worship, or places of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or places of going there thinking there is more reward in the ibadah or the worship that I do. Inshallah, we leave it there. We'll carry on from next lesson. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Wa ma alayna illa al-balagh al-mubin. Subhana rabbil izzati amma yasifun.